Most videos just move air about how to get hired at Google, Amazon, or Meta. In this one, I'll show you the exact 6 speaking steps that these companies actually hire for. I'll start with the worst interview answer I've heard and in real time turn it into the type of answer that makes the world's top companies want you on their teams. I'm Nick. I spent 20 years at Microsoft and Amazon building products and hiring great people. In this video, I'll break down the 6-step speaking system that the world's most selective companies actually listen for. And I'll show you how to tell stories that get you hired anywhere. Step 1 is framing your story, and the way to do that is with the STAR method. STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action, Result, and it's an interview method used to describe the candidate's prior professional accomplishments in the behavioral job interview. Behavioral interviews are practiced by a lot of different companies. Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, lots of others. So to use an analogy, if your interview stories start out messy, like a jumbled up Rubik's Cube, imagine this Rubik's Cube was jumbled up, the STAR method is how you align the colors of your story together neatly on each side of the Rubik's Cube. All right, let's switch to the role play next, where you can see how all of this works in action, in battle, when the stakes are high. Here's a poor STAR interview response. I'm gonna read it to you and then unpack each section from poor into exceptional. Happy and Bright hired me to help with their digital marketing strategy. Their products are great, but the only problem is their competitors are established. I researched the competitors and found some great strategies these competitors used. For example, we weren't using remarketing. I called my previous company Greengrass Studios to implement remarketing for us. Our conversion rate grew from 0 to 2%, which is a great conversion rate. All right, you can see this is a quite poor interview response. You can imagine maybe a marketing manager of some kind was asked, describe a professional accomplishment you're proud of, and they delivered this as their response. And as the interviewer, if I get a response like this, I need to spend the majority of my time finding out what happened and doing detective work. If I do that as the interviewer, the candidate gets a raw deal because I'm not spending my time trying to evaluate how and if the candidate raises my hiring bar. I'm just purely doing detective work. And by the time I have realized what the candidate's done, I'm exhausted. The interview is over. My time is up, and I don't even know if this candidate would be a good fit. Instead, I'll show you how to rework this ugly duckling of a response into a beautiful swan that's going to get you hired wherever you want. Okay, so let's start with the situation part of your answer. Here's how I have rewritten the situation part of this poor response. Happy and Bright is an e-learning company making STEM video lessons for 8-year-olds. It's based in the Netherlands and has annual revenues of 10 million euros. You see here how it's very clear who the company is, what their product is, how it solves the customer pain with the product. Also, I've listed a specific number to show you their annual revenues. So here you see how I'm using very clear illustrations and examples. Next, we move to the task section. And here's how that task would look like in a strong response. I was their head of digital marketing with 2 top goals. 1, grow annual revenues from 10 million euros to 15 million euros. And 2, grow the number of partner primary schools from 350 to 750. In this task section, I describe what was wrong, what I had to fix as the head of marketing in this case. I had to grow my revenues from 10 million to 15, and I had to grow my B2B partners from 350 to 750. Again, you see very clearly I'm using illustrations and examples. And secondly, I illustrate it even more clearly by using data, my revenue target in euros, and the number of schools that I need to work with. Also, notice in this task section how I'm stating that I was their head of digital marketing and I had these goals of X and Y. It's important in your star response to use I versus we. As an interviewer, whenever I ask the candidate, what did you do? If the candidate answers with we did this or we did that, I don't think a team player, I think a ghost employee. That's a joke, by the way. Before we leave the task section, I want to use an analogy. Imagine that the task section is like a Pepsi can. In the task section, something went wrong. This can is crumpled. And I need you in the task section to describe to me what was that thing that went wrong and that I had to fix. In this case, I had to grow revenues and my partners. In your case, it could be something else, but it needs to be very clear what the task was and what the problem was that you had to fix. All right, now we can move to the next part of your interview answer, which is the action section. I benchmark our marketing versus the top 7 EU e-learning companies, which use 13 different marketing techniques. We were the only ones not using remarketing. I evaluated the top 5 European Union marketing agencies and commissioned Greengrass Studios, who are such and such, to build remarketing for us. Here's what they did, and then used a bunch of data after as well. Okay, so the action section looks like a metronome. My next prop for you is this Newton's cradle. In your action section, you need to describe the steps that you took, one after the other. Boom, 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 methodically. In this case, let's see what actions I engaged in. First, I benchmarked our marketing versus the top 7 companies. Then I evaluated what techniques they used versus what we used. Then I figured out that we were not using remarketing. After that, I looked at the top 5 marketing agencies to find one of them to help us with remarketing. I chose Greengrass Studios, and then I would explain who Greengrass Studios are. I have to use even more data here. I've compacted my examples here for you in the interest of time. But during the interview, you can use anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes to unpack your star response fully. And as you can imagine, the majority of that time you would spend in your action section. Your action section should not read like a mystery novel, like a crime whodunit novel. I shouldn't worry if the old lady committed the murder. I should know specifically what were the steps. You show me your work. You show me the data points that were involved, and you describe your actions. Now, in your examples, you don't need to describe every single step along the way. You need to describe the big beats of the story, the 4 or 5 big beats that I already outlined in this action section. You don't need to go one level deeper and describe every single component of those big beats. You need to give me 1 or 2 examples for each of those large steps and beats in your action section. But those examples don't need to be exhaustive. They need to be illustrative. And by being illustrative, you, on the one hand, you'll explain clearly what happened. And on the other hand, you'll be able to compress and fit your answer within the 5 to 7 minute mark for your full star. All right. And the next section is the result part of the story. Let me read to you what I have written. Because of remarketing, we closed 515 new partner schools, which led to 4.5 million euros in incremental revenues the following year, which meant beating both my revenue and new partner goals. So here it's important to use dollar-based, in this case euro-based data, to manifest the output of your work. Companies do 99% of all their actions to make money, to either grow revenue or to cut costs. You need to explain that benefit, that output in the results section. You need to show me the data. To use a different analogy, if this is a bowl of water and this is a heavy object, in this case a hockey puck, if I drop the hockey puck in the water, it causes a splash. It causes ripples in the water. You've got to show me what those ripples are. That's the quantifiable dollar-based data that lives in your results section and brings everything in your star answer to a final completion. Okay, this leads us to what are the different star variants out there. I'll segment the different star types in two different ways. The first one is I'll segment them by company, and the second one is I'll segment them by type of star. Let's start with segmentation by company. As I mentioned earlier in this video, lots of companies out there use the star method. You can use the foundation that I've described in this video for all of them, but also you need to do your research and fine-tune certain elements of your star answer per each company. To use an analogy, imagine if you have a number of different keys to the door and you need to find out the exact perfect fit of the key to the lock for each company that you're interviewing with. I'll give you an example. Earlier in this video, I said how it's important to use I versus we when describing your star answers. Some companies like Netflix, Amazon, Meta, they're very, very clear that if you say we, it's almost like the kiss of death. You're hiding behind something, and you need to be ultra specific to describe what you have done. So for those companies, you gotta be ultra clear that it was you who did A, B, C, or D. However, other companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, who also practice STAR, they prefer a little bit more inclusive and collegiate approach when solving problems. For those companies, you always need to be clear of what you've done, but you need to describe that in the context of you being a member on a team. This was just one example of tiny nuances that do not invalidate the STAR method. You should absolutely go through every step that I've outlined so far, but you also need to do your homework. Read about the company's culture. You have to know their values to match your accomplishments to their values in the behavioral interview anyway. Read Reddit posts about the company's cultures as well. Use AI to do your research on these companies. And the second type of STAR segmentation has to do with slightly different flavors of the STAR relay and STAR methodology. There's the R-STAR method, for example, where you briefly list the results before the situation, task, action, result section. So in my example, it would sound something like, hey, I'll tell you about the time when I grew revenues by 5 million euros, and here's what happened, and you continue with the rest of the STAR story. Different type of stars use obstacle in the task section. And there you need to emphasize even more clearly what steps you took in order to evaluate what was broken. I love the SOAR method because I think it's very powerful and it pushes for agency of you taking ownership of the issue and pushing through that obstacle instead of you passively waiting for your management to commission a task to you. And I'll mention one more major flavor of STAR. It's called the STAR L, where after the results, you list the lessons that you've learned. Okay, now you know how to answer your stories powerfully in the STAR framework. You're ready next to watch this video here where I show you how to evaluate and score your STAR answers along the rubric that I just outlined. Watch this video here next to find out, and good luck in your interviews.